Prisoners tortured and executed, uncovering the evidence of the brutality of the Assad's rule. Inside the hospital morgue in Damascus, where people come to find the loved ones they lost, doctors tell us many were killed in the regime's final days.
This is where the bodies are being taken. Families are taking a look on mobile phones at photographs of the dead that have numbers on them so that they can try and identify them.
We'll have eyewitness reporting and analysis from our correspondents across the Middle East on the regional ramifications of Syria's revolution. Also tonight. A court hears how a 15-year-old girl begged for her life as she was stabbed in the streets for trying to protect her friend. Babies buried in unmarked graves, the shocking latest from our investigation into homes for unmarried mothers run by the church 50 years ago. Its debts are growing just like its pollution levels, but at Britain's biggest water company, the management bonuses are going up too. And
I want to talk to you without speaking.
We're live on the red carpet with Daniel Craig for the film he says he could never have made while he was Bond.
This is the ITV Evening News with Geraint Vincent.
Good evening. We start tonight with an eyewitness account from a hospital in Damascus where the brutality of the Assad regime is being laid bare. As Syria's new leader offered a reward for details of officials involved in war crimes, ITV News has seen evidence of just some of those atrocities. We saw bodies brought into a morgue from the notorious Sednaya prison and from military sites. Most showed signs of torture. Such was the number of victims, families and relatives searching for the missing had to be shown photographs before being allowed to identify them in person. And there were many shocking stories of how fathers, mothers and children who disappeared under Assad were never seen again. Some were murdered just a few days ago as their captors fled. And a warning before you watch this report from our international editor, Emma Murphy. There are images of body bags throughout and details you may find upsetting.
On trolley after trolley, bodies came. So many, they were running out of space to store them. For now, they were simply a number. For those clamouring at the doors, the hope was for a name. What agonies have already been endured, when solace would be knowing it's your relative beneath the shroud. Word had spread since dawn that bodies of the disappeared were being found in regime buildings.
These families are absolutely desperate to know whether their relatives are amongst the bodies that have been brought here. This is where the bodies are being taken. Families are taking a look on mobile phones at photographs of the dead that have numbers on them so that they can try and identify them. And then further on through here is where the post-mortems are taking place. In here, doctors are trying to establish how those that they're looking at have died. The evidence that they gather here will be absolutely critical to any war crimes investigation that is likely to take place in the years ahead.
Some need no investigation to confirm the horrors that have gone on here. God burn him, burn his heart, she shouts. I want him to die and his kids too. My son was 14, they took him and his brother. We want him put on trial, his wife and his family. Tell us which number, the doctor says. Only then would families be let in to see if the often disfigured image in the photograph was actually their relative. The Assad regime was notorious for detaining and disappearing people on a vast scale. Today we saw the bodies of some of the disappeared, stacked in piles, unidentified, save for the very identifiable signs of torture. And we heard the stories of the disappeared from those who wished to find them. This woman is searching for 13 members of her family, including her grandchildren. Adnan had brought her granddaughter Rawa. Rawa's never seen her father. He and his brother had been taken in 2011 and 2013. I'm lost, she said. I don't know what to do, so I thought I'd just come and see if they were here. Like so many others, they were seen as being disloyal to the regime. Mohammed told me her son was accused of the same crime at just 13. She tried for 7 years to get pregnant with him. He's now been missing for 10. 2 weeks ago, Talib, who's blind, visited his brother Fadi in Zednaya prison. Today, his mother saw his body in a pile on television. The military police shot him just before they fled, he tells me. We visited one of the regime hospitals where some of the bodies had been found and saw burnt documents which could tell of who was confined here. Their history destroyed, like their lives. Mohammed Bakri is a nurse and found the bodies. 39 men and 1 woman, all with signs of abuse.
In the final days of the Assad regime, they insisted that it was business as normal. What was found here proves that it definitely was. There were bodies from many weeks ago with torture wounds and also fresh bodies, also tortured. Back at the hospital, family testimony supports that view. This 17-year-old was taken by Syrian intelligence 4 days before the regime fell. He was executed as they fled. In dreadful measure of the tragedy of these families, they are seen as the more fortunate ones. He was only missing for a few days, and now they get to leave with a body. Emma Murphy, ITV News, Damascus.
Well, the collapse of the Assad regime changes the political map of the Middle East, and it could have far-reaching implications, not just for its neighbours, but also the wider world. Syria has a population of around 24 million people, although about 5 million of them have fled overseas to escape the civil war. The country lies in an area of high strategic importance on the east of the Mediterranean. It borders Turkey to its north, Iraq to the east, Jordan to the south, and Lebanon and Israel to the west and southwest. And each of them has a very keen interest in who is now in control, as our correspondent John Ray reports from Istanbul.
First light in free Damascus. The peace is fragile. The rebels are few in number, the city large, and the challenges enormous. From the south, Israeli troops have crossed the border, violating a 40-year-old peace deal to occupy positions abandoned by Assad's army. The plan, Israel insists, is to get there before any of Syria's Islamist fighters. But they're hitting hundreds of targets to stop weapons falling into the hands of extremists. According to some reports denied by Israel, their tanks have advanced to within touching distance of the capital itself. Already, neighbouring nations are fighting over the spoils of revolution.
From now on, we cannot allow Syria to be divided ever again. We can never allow the country's territory to become a battleground.
Syria is now at the centre of a power struggle between international rivals. For Israel, Assad was the link between its enemies in Iran and Hezbollah, a weapons supply route they'll hope to destroy. Israel's also seized the buffer zone inside Syria along the occupied Golan Heights, created after a 1974 ceasefire between the countries. It claims the move is temporary. To the north, Turkey's backed the rebels and plans to play a dominating role, but it also wants to push Kurdish separatists away from the border. The toughest task might be to stop Syria splintering.
I think it will be chaos because there are not strong leaders in Syria now. People are very happy that Assad is collapsed, but after a few days, what will be happy, they don't know.
Syria's Christians are just one minority who need reassurance they have nothing to fear. Tonight, Syria's new caretaker Prime Minister held his first cabinet meeting. There is an appearance of a smooth transition from the old regime. But the reality is far more chaotic, unpredictable and dangerous. The Syrian people are free of Assad's bloodthirsty rule, but may yet fall prey to ambitious forces inside and outside their country. A peaceful outcome is by no means guaranteed. John Ray, ITV News, Istanbul.
Well, let's go back to Emma now in Damascus. Emma, we saw in your report the desperation of those poor families at the hospital. Hundreds of thousands of people have disappeared over 50 years of Assad rule, a huge number still unaccounted for. What hope is there, do you think, that they might be found?
Well, I think as every day passes, the hopes that these families had that they might find their relatives either in some kind of hidden prison or in some kind of other government institution is starting to fade. We're talking about tens of thousands of people. And of course, when the prisons were liberated, the prisoners left. The ones that left have gone home. So the families that didn't find them on the doorstep know that they're not coming home that way. So that's why they've gone to the hospitals to try and see whether or not they can find the bodies. And we saw hundreds and hundreds of those families and heard those dreadfully heartbreaking testimonies from them today. But there was only a smallish number of bodies in there compared to the number of the missing. So it really would lead you to believe that somewhere in this country there may well be some very significant mass graves that will hold the bodies of thousands of people who've disappeared during the 2 generations of Assad rule, both the father and the son. In terms of where this country is tonight, well, the airstrikes have continued by Israel, who are trying to destroy as much of the weaponry from the Assad regime as they possibly can. And we've seen a pretty relentless barrage over the past couple of days, at least 300 strikes on certain sites all across the country. But the ruling government, the self-appointed government here at the moment, have said that they want to get things back to normal as quickly as possible. And though there is a curfew in place at night, they are encouraging people to try and get back to work, to try and get the government offices back, to try and ensure some kind of smooth transition over these coming days and weeks.
Emma Murphy in Damascus, many thanks. Here, the government says it is focused on the risk of British jihadists returning to the UK from Syria. There are concerns over what happens if extremists being held in camps and prisons in the north of the country are now freed. Our political correspondent Harry Horton reports.
In 13 years of civil war, tens of thousands of prisoners, many with links to Islamic State, were locked up in these camps in northeast Syria. Among the most high-profile is Shamima Begum, stripped of her British citizenship 5 years ago. Like the rest of Syria, the future of these camps is uncertain. Security services are watching closely.
Recently we saw the security services saying that they're going to have to spend less time looking at terrorism and more time looking at state threats emanating from Russia, and it appears that they're going to have to shift some of that balance back to terror threats coming out of Syria.
More than 3,000 Syrian nationals have crossed the English Channel this year. Yesterday, the Home Office said all ongoing asylum claims from Syria would be paused. Rightly so, say some opposition parties.
People who committed atrocities in the name of Assad could, try and slip away from the country to avoid justice, and worse still, that maybe some ISIS fighters try to escape and come to our country. It is quite right that the British government, albeit belatedly, said we're going to put a freeze on this. We have to be very, very cautious about anybody crossing the Channel over the course of the next month or two.
The government says British jihadists held in camps are a key focus for the UK and other countries. It's not clear how many people in Syria this relates to, but human rights groups say the majority should not be seen as a threat.
We're talking about a group that is mostly children. Of the adult women, a significant majority were trafficked to Syria. National security is best served by taking control of the situation and the UK repatriating these people, and actually if the UK repatriates them now, they can be taken into custody.
These camps in Kurdish territory are, for now, secure. The future of the British people held here is anything but, and what risk they might pose, unclear. Harry Houghton, ITV News.
Israel's Prime Minister has appeared in court for the first time in his long-running corruption trial. Benjamin Netanyahu has been charged with bribery, fraud and breach of trust. He denies any wrongdoing. Dozens of protesters, both supporting and opposing the Prime Minister, gathered outside the court in Tel Aviv today. And Rupert Murdoch's attempt to give his eldest son control of his family media empire has been blocked by a court in the United States. The judgment accused him of acting in bad faith by attempting to change his family trust to benefit his eldest son, Lachlan. The New York Times reported the battle began after his other children watched an episode of Succession, which told the story of what happened after the fictional patriarch of a huge media company died. A friend of 15-year-old Eliane Andam told a jury today how she saw her stabbed to death in South London as she was on her way to school. The girl, who can't be identified for legal reasons, described how her former boyfriend, Hassan Sentamu, got mad when Eliane took his bag as a joke. Police officers who were first on the scene told the Old Bailey how they tried desperately to save her life. Our correspondent Sejal Carrier reports.
What's your name?
Just 90 minutes after stabbing schoolgirl Eliane Andam,
I'm looking for someone who's just stabbed someone.
Hassan Sentamu was caught. His murder trial heard today.
Put your hands behind your back. Put your hands behind your back now.
Putting the handcuffs on, the police officer told the court he noticed blood on the teenager's thumb.
I didn't even do nothing, bro.
The prosecution say he'd killed 15-year-old Eliane in a row over a teddy bear, lashing out with a kitchen knife after refusing to hand back possessions belonging to her friend, with whom he'd recently broken up. This image, the court heard, captured him running away from the scene with a knife in his hand after repeatedly stabbing Eliane outside a shopping centre in South London. In a video interview played to court today, his ex-girlfriend, who can't be named because of her age, described the confrontation, saying he turned up for the exchange wearing gloves and a mask. And after a row which saw Eliane grabbing a bag off him, captured on CCTV, the girl said she saw him pulling out a big knife and begin stabbing Eliane. Just moments before, Eliane had posted this Snapchat video that was shown to the jury, expressing her frustration with Hassan Sentamu.
You didn't even bring the stuff. You didn't bring the fucking stuff.
He admits killing Eliane but denies murder, claiming diminished responsibility, having been diagnosed with autism. He also claims he had a lawful reason for carrying the knife. Sejal Carrier, ITV News.
There's plenty more to come on the ITV Evening News, including nearly 200 babies buried in unmarked graves. Our investigation brings the harrowing secrets from homes for unmarried mothers to light.
Once they no longer are desirable and that they're no longer able to be passed off as somebody else's, as part of this adoptive family, that they're treated substandardly.
In hot water, with pollution cases rising and debt spiralling, it's not good news for the UK's largest water company. And these parasites simply had it coming, the writings of the man charged with murdering the health insurance boss in New York. All that and more after the break. Welcome back. Council workers and unions in Birmingham have welcomed a settlement with the city's council over a multi-million-pound equal pay claim. Most of the 6,000 staff affected are low-paid women. The Labour-run council won't say how much the final sum is, but ITV News understands it's around £250 million. That's much less than the £700 million the council thought the deal would cost last year, a figure which prompted steep rises in council tax and harsh cuts to public services. And it's now facing questions over whether it had to go so far. Our deputy political editor, Anushka Astana, has this special report.
What do we want? Equal pay! When do we want it?
This fight began when female teaching assistants realised that male refuse workers in comparable jobs could be paid twice as much per hour by Birmingham Council.
We were stunned, absolutely stunned.
It was a bit of an insult, if I'm honest, because we know how hard we work.
The injustice spurred Claire, Pamela and thousands of others to launch a major legal challenge and go on strike. Today they found out the council is ready to settle.
How do you feel about the fact that a deal's been done?
Overjoyed, really.
Yeah.
Finally, we've been listened to. Frustrated that it's taken what it has, because it hasn't been a simple process. It hasn't been quick and easy.
Do you accept that Birmingham Council has historically treated women less well than men?
I think it's absolutely clear that there's been pay injustice in this organisation, and that's why it's so important that we finally eliminate this challenge that has dogged this council over many years.
The council originally claimed equal pay would cost it £700 million, but sources have told ITV News the actual payout could be half of that, and unions are happy. So did they overestimate the challenge?
Last year, Birmingham said that this equal pay scandal was one of the key factors driving it towards the edge of bankruptcy. The council issued what's known as the Section 114 notice, with painful consequences for residents who are facing big council tax rises and serious service cuts.
You just do not get it. You just don't get it.
Jean Cross recently turned up at a council meeting to protest the closure of Harborne Day Centre, where she's been taking her disabled brother Robert for over 40 years, giving her a little respite as his carer.
Are you angry?
I am angry, yes.
You're angry?
Yeah, I am very angry, yes. I saved this council thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds. I don't have carers coming in. I do Robert all on my own. We are cheap labour. And I say this day centre is our lifeline.
Do you think if they'd waited on the equal pay situation that they might have been able to save this place?
Yes, I do.
Birmingham insists it had no choice, and it is not alone. ITV News knows of almost 20 councils from Dundee to Brighton facing similar equal pay claims. Anushka Astana, ITV News.
Debts are spiralling at troubled Thames Water, but they're not its biggest problem. New figures show it's continuing to pollute our rivers and waterways, recording a staggering 40% increase in just the past 6 months. It's currently £16 billion in debt, and it's demanding customers' bills rise by 60% to keep it afloat. And despite all that, its chief executive has defended the payment of £770,000 in bonuses to the company's senior management. Our business editor, Joel Hills, is here. Joel, what can we say? Why don't you talk us through this latest situation with Thames Water?
Well, the big problem Thames has got is it's heavily indebted. It is also, as you point out, struggling to deliver an adequate service to its customers. Now, there is a chance that the company will have to be nationalised at some point in the new year, but for now, it marches on. Now, the good news, Geraint, is customer complaints have actually fallen, and there are some signs that the company is also managing to reduce the amount of leakage, fresh drinking water leakage that's happening in its pipes. But we do have a situation where there was a sharp increase in pollution incidents. Have a look at this map. I love this map. This is the latest situation, Geraint, across the Thames Water network. Now, the red and orange dots that you can see there are where a storm overflow has spilled untreated waste into rivers and waterways in the last 48 hours. We went to one site. This is the storm drain at Abyss Roding this afternoon, emptying a mixture, you can see there, of rainwater and raw sewage into Cooper's Brook, near Epping in Essex. Now, there were 73 recorded spills at this one site last year, although you can see the number of spills has halved since 2020. Now, Thames Water is blaming an extremely wet summer and a very wet spring for all the problems that it had in the 6 months through to the end of September. It's also blaming ageing network of pipes and treatment centres that desperately need investment. Now, the company has only got enough cash to get it through till next March. It's also trying to raise £3 billion of new money from investors. Its ability to do that, Geraint, depends on it being able to persuade its creditors to write off some of the money that they're owed, and the regulator to put customers' bills up very substantially.
Right, OK. Thanks, Joel. The man suspected of shooting dead the boss of a big health insurance company in Manhattan last week has been charged with his murder. 26-year-old Luigi Mangione was arrested at a McDonald's restaurant in Pennsylvania. Authorities say he's an Ivy League university graduate from a prominent family, and they told the public he's no hero. Will Tullis has the latest.
Shot dead as dawn broke on a New York street. This footage, captured last Wednesday, shows the final moments of Brian Thompson, the United Health CEO, head of one of America's largest health insurers. Now, 6 days after a manhunt that crossed state lines, the suspect has at last been found, arrested and brought before the court.
Altoona police officers received a call of a suspicious male at a local restaurant. It was reported that the male matched the description of the United Healthcare murderer in New York City.
26-year-old Luigi Mangione has now been charged with murder and the possession of a weapon and a forged document. After 6 days on the run, the hunt for one of America's most wanted ended in this Pennsylvania McDonald's, where a worker recognised him. Mangione was found with a fake ID, this 3D printed gun, and a handwritten note apologising and explaining his actions, reportedly calling United Healthcare parasites who had it coming.
We do not kill people in cold blood to resolve policy differences or express a viewpoint. I understand people have real frustration with our healthcare system, but I have no tolerance, nor should anyone, for one man using an illegal ghost gun to murder someone.
Luigi Mangione's family has now responded. In a statement shared with CNN, they said, "Our family is shocked and devastated by Luigi's arrest. We offer our prayers to the family of Brian Thompson, and we ask people to pray for all involved." It's a shock shared by his former roommate, who confirmed Mangione had recently had major surgery.
He sent me the x-rays. It looked heinous, with just giant screws going into his spine.
While the manhunt is over and the suspect unmasked, today more questions over how this could happen and how Luigi Mangione evaded capture for so long. Will Tullis, ITV News.
You're watching the ITV Evening News. It's just after 7 o'clock. Here's what's still ahead. The Welsh Government unveils its new budget with big boosts for education and the NHS. The King commemorates those who died in the line of duty with a new honour.
I'll be live at the premiere of Queer, Daniel Craig's new film, which some predict could earn him an Oscar nomination.
And as the week continues, high pressure will dominate, bringing dry weather and a little sunshine, but also some overnight frosts and a bit of fog. More details in the full national forecast coming up later in the programme.
First, an ITV News investigation has found that nearly 200 babies who died at church-run homes for unmarried mothers are buried in unmarked graves across England. The burials, dating from the 1950s through to the 1970s, were often carried out in secret without the knowledge of their families. Our findings are from Freedom of Information requests we made about 8 former homes. But there were once more than 150 of them across the country, and campaigners say that what we've discovered may just be the tip of the iceberg. It follows our investigation earlier this year, which found a mass unmarked grave in Cumbria containing 45 babies. After watching that report, a woman who was born at a maternity home in North London contacted us. She's told us how she's carried the stigma of being born out of wedlock with her ever since. Our social affairs correspondent, Sarah Corker, has this special report.
And I knew that was the last time I would ever see him.
Babies taken, mothers traumatised, lives changed forever.
And I just would like to know who he is.
Our 6-month investigation has already revealed historic abuse at homes for unmarried mothers.
I haven't fully ever recovered from that experience.
And babies buried in unmarked graves in Cumbria.
If there's more babies in here, how much of this has gone on in the UK?
Now we have new chilling evidence exposing the scale of this cruelty.
Burial records obtained by ITV News through a series of Freedom of Information requests reveal that nearly 200 babies are buried in unmarked graves across England. burials that often took place in secret, without even the family's knowledge. The babies were born and died in homes for unmarried mothers. Our evidence shows burials connected to at least 5 Church of England-run homes, dozens of unmarked graves in Cumbria, Northampton, Aylesbury, Brentwood and Winchester. 24 infants died at a Salvation Army home in Newcastle called Hope Dean. The infants are buried in unmarked graves in 4 different cemeteries. 2 Catholic-run homes, one in Kendal and one in North London, called St Pelasia's, where 37 infants are buried in unmarked graves. The records don't say how they died.
It's just absolutely harrowing. It's the worst of the worst, isn't it?
Margaret was born at St Pelasia's, a home run by nuns in the 1950s. We showed her our findings.
Nobody chooses to be born there, and it's just so sad. Those girls were looked on as the dregs of society, and their offspring very much the same.
In the 1950s, 60s and 70s, it's estimated 250,000 women, many unmarried teenagers, were sent away to mother and baby homes, many of them coerced into putting their babies up for adoption. Margaret never met her birth mother and only recently discovered her own personal records.
One of the things on it that really hurt me, it said, "It can hear." I was considered coloured. Coloured was the phrase then. Biracial now, of course. And I wasn't considered correct for adoption through the home.
A story of a very difficult start to life, in fact.
The first 3 years of Margaret's life were spent in an orphanage and then foster care.
Social services, children's department, all the different departments, etc.
Our investigation has taken us across England. I'm on my way to Lancaster University to meet a historian who spent years studying these institutions.
Were infant mortality rates within these homes high?
Yes. If you are passing through a mother and baby home, there is a more likelihood of you not surviving because you're unmarried and because you're in a space which is effectively cut off from the wider health and social care system more broadly.
We showed him our evidence of nearly 200 unmarked baby graves.
That's pretty harrowing.
He believes the true figure could be much higher.
What does this information tell us about how these children were treated? It's the fact that so many are dying.
I think it shows once they no longer are desirable and that they're no longer able to be passed off as somebody else's, as part of this adoptive family, that they're treated substandardly and they're not being afforded access to modern medical care, which a legitimate child at this time would have had.
At that time, being pregnant outside of wedlock was the ultimate taboo. In 1962, June was a childcare officer. She says without access to council housing or an income, single mothers had few choices. She recalls collecting infants from mother and baby homes.
I know I took babies. I know I was given babies. It's a terrible thought, isn't it? I had mothers handing their babies over to me. And that's something you never forget.
June says the policies at that time could be cruel.
I have awful thoughts, really, that the norm was adopters didn't want black children and didn't want disabled children. But of course, also they were white adopters, weren't they? We were not looking for black adopters.
What impact would you say this has had throughout your life?
I say I carry a hole in my soul with it. You're marked, you carry that stigma. You carry it for the rest of your life, the repercussions of it.
It is a dark period in our nation's recent history, and those affected now want the government to acknowledge its role in this scandal.
Sarah, what your work has exposed is just dreadful, isn't it? But just normal practice at the time. What's been the response from the organisations involved then?
It is distressing, and I've spent the last 6 months investigating these institutions. Now, the Church of England and the Salvation Army have both said they were deeply saddened to hear of the traumatic experiences of mother and babies. They described it as a tragedy and said they will help anyone who wants to get access to their personal records. Now, Margaret, who you heard in my report there, she was born in a home that was run by an order of Catholic nuns. They've said that their thoughts are with all of those affected. But they said because homes closed so many decades ago, it is quite challenging to find the relevant information. But there is a growing campaign by birth mothers to get a formal government apology for the state's role in all of this. They want on record that they did not willingly give up their children. They say they were pressured, they were coerced, they were forced to do so. The Department of Education have described this practice as abhorrent. They said it should never have happened, and they say they are looking at what extra support they can provide to those affected. But it's worth saying that this is nearly identical to the statement that the government sent me 6 months ago when I first did a report on this, and birth mothers, campaigners say that there's no sense of urgency. Many of them are now in their 70s and 80s, and time is not on their side.
OK, Sarah, many thanks. And if you've been affected by Sarah's report, there is help and support on our website, itv.com/news. And this won't be the end of Sarah's investigation. If you have information or first-hand experience that you wish to share, the email is investigations@itv.com. Now, let's get an update on what's making the news tonight. In Syria, ITV News saw the proof of Assad's brutal regime laid bare as relatives lined up at a morgue to see if they could find their lost relatives. Our team witnessed bodies with signs of torture. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said he wants a relationship with Syria's new regime, but if the regime allows Iran to re-establish itself in Syria, Israel would respond forcefully. The Welsh Labour government has pledged hundreds of millions of pounds to tackle record high waiting times in the NHS. Unveiling its budget, it also promised funding for road projects and for schools. Opposition parties, though, questioned how much of the money will be gobbled up by rising national insurance costs. The budget will be voted on next March, and the Labour government will need the support of another party to get it through. Here's our Wales reporter, Rhys Williams.
Army veteran Anthony has already lost sight in one eye. He's waiting for cataract surgery on the other. But with waiting lists here in Wales so long, he worries he'll go blind before the NHS can help him.
A 20-minute operation, that's all I need. You know, to look out the window every day and think, Jesus. This is it forever.
It is a budget for priorities. It is a budget for growth.
To deal with the record-high waiting times, the Welsh Government is pledging hundreds of millions in extra NHS spending. All other departments, including education, have been promised more cash, with extra funding too for additional learning needs provision.
It's been really challenging for the last probably 10 years.
While this head teacher welcomes the uplift, he's sceptical.
One of the challenges in Wales is money comes from government. It goes through 22 local authorities before it even gets into a school. And ultimately the call from myself as a head and many other head teachers is that we just need to see the money in our budgets in school.
Health and education are the major political headaches for this Labour government. 2-year-plus NHS waiting times, almost unheard of in England, remain stubbornly high here in Wales, while educational attainment is at its lowest ever level. Isn't the problem in Wales delivery rather than throwing money at the problem?
Well, there's a delivery challenge, and that's what the First Minister is absolutely focused on. She's appointed a minister for delivery in the Welsh Government. You can't deliver without the basic resources to do it, and services in Wales have been starved of those resources by 14 years of Conservative government.
But for kids in classrooms across the country and patients stuck on NHS waiting lists, it's the delivery that counts, not just the money being spent. Rhys Williams, ITV News, Cardiff.
The former England rugby star Tom Voice is believed to have died after trying to cross a flood-swollen river in his car in Northumberland. Local police said the 43-year-old has been missing since Saturday, while his car, which is believed to have been swept away in the River Alm during Storm Dara, has since been recovered. The Culture Secretary today addressed the allegations being made about Greg Wallace, saying there are too many of these cultures of silence and issues being swept under the rug. Lisa Nandy told the Commons Culture Committee that she is prepared to take further action if the wider creative industry cannot tackle the issue, but she did not propose any immediate action. Daniel Craig is back on the big screen again, but not as Bond. In his latest movie, Queer, he stars as an American drug addict who becomes infatuated with a younger man.
In the sun,
What's you got to lose?
the sun
Independence.
in the sun, in the sun.
I want to talk to you
Married, buried,
without speaking.
Well, our entertainment reporter Rishi Davda is at the film's premiere tonight in Mayfair in central London. And Rishi, a short time ago you spoke to the man himself.
I did, and the former 007 was excited and a little chilly here at the screening of Queer, the story of William Lee, a gay man. I began by asking the actor how it felt to be nominated for a Golden Globe for the role just yesterday, and whether or not he'd allowed himself to think about a possible Oscar nomination too, which would be his first.
It's all good. It's all gravy. I mean, it's a very nice thing. I'd be lying if I told you I wasn't pleased. I'm very happy, but we'll see.
When I think about what's come before and having a part in a huge franchise, is that something that drew you to a role like this, it being so vastly different? Is that how you pick projects going forward?
No, I don't. No, I don't pick projects on the back of other projects. That's kind of that's not the way to go. So I just think it's. You pick things with your gut and your heart, and I hope you'll get complicated characters like this to play.
And when you think about what you'd like to do in the future, something that's been particularly popular this year, looking at things that people are engaging with, is things in the musical sphere. And we always see you as a great creative who loves to challenge himself. Is that somewhere we could go potentially?
Sure. Whatever. What are the hours? Yeah. All right.
So I wouldn't write off a musical just yet. That's for Queer. It's out in cinemas this Friday.
OK, many thanks, Rishi. Still to come on ITV News. The King hands out the first Elizabeth emblems for the families of those who died serving their communities.
And colder nights are in effect. The wind, though, only going to make it feel even chillier. I have all the details in the forecast coming next.
Join me and Alex after the break. Time for the weather now, and Alex is here. Alex, James Bond is chilly. We just heard from Rishi.
Yeah.
But there is some brighter weather ahead.
Oh, a little bit here and there, actually. More so in the north, like it has been over the last few days. But actually, for many of us this afternoon, it certainly was a pretty cloudy affair, as you can see on the satellite and radar picture. And even where it was clear this morning in the north in terms of cloud cover, there was also a bit of fog around. In fact, there is a very small fog warning in place overnight around the Glasgow area, where visibility could be quite poor as we head towards tomorrow morning. But let's take a look at how the rest of this week is shaping up. And generally speaking, it's going to be on the quiet side. Not a great deal of rain. We've got high pressure dominating. It's going to be a rather cloudy affair at times. But as I say, further north is where we're going to see probably the best spells of any brightness over the next few days, but certainly feeling on the chilly side, the wind also not helping things. Let's take a look actually at what we're expecting with our nighttime temperatures tonight. Those shelter glens of Scotland, much like last night, could get down to around -10, maybe even a little bit colder. So a sharp frost certainly developing in these areas. Cold across southern parts of England, but certainly on the plus side with enough cloud probably for most of us to escape a frost first thing tomorrow. But let's take a look at our air mass charts to see how things are shaping up as we head through the next few days. Certainly a chill in the air, no thanks to the wind, but also on Friday night going into Saturday, that's when we're going to see another cold spell developing. So certainly a sharp frost some areas as we head through into this weekend, which is looking quite chilly. Let's take a look though at the details for the next couple of days in more detail right now.
Visibility may be low this evening as the cold weather hits. Heinz Soups sponsors ITV National Weather.
Well, let's take a quick look at the pressure pattern setup and get confirmation of that high pressure, which is going to be sat over the UK as we head through the next 24 hours, certainly, and it does stay with us for much of this week. So, as I say, largely quiet conditions. That'll be welcome news after the storm that we had last weekend. As for this evening and overnight, well, you're going to see those clearing skies across parts of Scotland, drag temperatures down quite cold. So in towns and cities, certainly falling below freezing, maybe down to -1, -2, -3 in places. But as I say, it is going to be those sheltered glens that do get down to -8 or -9. Further south, it does stay on the plus side, but certainly a colder night all round for many of us. So that chill in the air will be with us first thing tomorrow morning. That northerly flow not helping things either. So feeling a little bit colder once you factor in the wind chill. But you can see, again, brighter skies across Scotland, northern parts of England in places, and also for Northern Ireland. But first thing tomorrow morning, just watch out for a bit of mist and fog. That's why that warning has been issued by the Met Office a short time ago. But you can see temperatures across some parts of Scotland in the afternoon only getting up to around 1 or 2 degrees. But further south, highs of 7, 8 at the very best. So certainly a chill in the air all round. Similar picture to come on Thursday in terms of our temperatures. In fact, it stays that way for much of this week. So the one thing you will have to do over the next few days is grab an extra layer. But you can leave your body at home because, as I say, it's staying dry.
Heinz Soups sponsors ITV National Weather.
So that's the way it is looking this evening. As I say, high pressure in control. So it's a quiet week, but a cold week, as I was just saying.
Got it. Thanks, Alex. Finally tonight, the royal honour for emergency workers who've died in the line of duty. The King today presented the first new awards called Elizabeth Emblems to relatives of former firefighters, police officers and other public servants. Some had waited decades for the recognition. Our royal editor Chris Shipp heard what it meant to their families.
So many police and fire officers have died in the line of duty. The new awards handed out by the King today stretched from 1948. The Edgar brothers were toddlers when they lost their dad, all the way to 2019. An award for the wife of PC Andrew Harper, killed in the Thames Valley. It's called the Elizabeth Emblem. The King insisted it carried his mother's name. Until today, there was no way of recognising a non-military public servant who'd lost their life.
I was 4.5 then at that time and had very few memories indeed, sadly.
Les and Neil Edgar took the award for their dad, Nathaniel Edgar, shot dead on duty in London nearly 77 years ago.
I think it's quite incredible. I just find it a great, great honour that he should be remembered after such a long, long time.
But after the killing in 2012 of 2 police constables in Manchester, Fiona Bone and Nicola Hughes, who were attacked with a grenade and shot, their fathers decided such sacrifice in public service should be remembered. Today, 12 years after their deaths, Paul Bone and Bryn Hughes were handed the awards they'd campaigned for.
To see so many people holding onto those emblems, holding onto these certificates, having met the King, there's an immense feeling of pride and relief there. It's finally come together.
Knowing that the sacrifice has been remembered in this way?
Yes, and each one is equally as tragic and as sad as like Nicola and Fiona that day.
And throughout the rooms of Windsor Castle today, there were families of many firefighters, like the sister of Fleur Lombard, killed on duty in 1996.
They get up to go to work, their family expects them to come home for their tea, and sometimes the worst thing possibly happens and they don't.
And now there is a way to remember them. Chris Shipp, ITV News, Windsor Castle.
And that's all for now. Julie's here with News at 10 from me and the Evening News team. Bye-bye.